Mike Lenz had testified against it, stood in front of committees and said plainly that dumping 500,000 tons of discarded oyster shells into the Gulf of Mexico would destroy fishing grounds his family had worked for 3 generations. He had the credibility that comes from 25 years on the water. He had the vocabulary of someone who understood tides and currents and the way ecosystems collapse slowly, then suddenly. He was not a fringe voice. He was exactly the kind of witness who changes minds in rooms where decisions get made. In 2013, standing at the rail of his own boat over one of the established reef sites near Cedar Key, he watched a school of redfish holding in the current around a shell mound and said something he had not planned to say. He said he was wrong. He said he had never seen fish stack like that in 25 years on that water. That reversal is the story that the Florida Oyster Shell program never quite got credit for producing. Not because the science was not extraordinary, it was, but because the science only confirmed what the reversal had already demonstrated. Something had changed on the Gulf floor, something large enough and fast enough and undeniable enough to move a man who had staked his professional reputation on predicting the opposite outcome. The question worth asking now is not what formed down there. The question is what it actually takes to change a mind that has every reason to stay fixed. The opposition to the program had been built on entirely rational foundations. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission began collecting discarded shells from restaurants and seafood plants in 2007, loading them onto barges and depositing them in the Gulf near Cedar Key. The premise was almost absurdly low-tech. There was no engineering precision, no sophisticated placement algorithm, no carefully designed reef module. They were scraped off plates and shoveled out of processing plants and tipped overboard. Environmental groups called it ocean dumping, dressed up as conservation. Their concern was specific and defensible. The soft, sandy bottom of that stretch of Gulf supported its own fragile ecosystem, and dropping hundreds of thousands of tons of calcium debris onto it risked smothering whatever was left. Lenz and the charter captains who fished those waters shared a different but equally concrete fear: disrupted sediment, altered currents, permanent damage to grounds that families had fished for a century. None of these concerns were unreasonable. They were based on how ecosystems had actually responded to human interventions in the past, which is to say, badly, slowly, or not at all. The history of Gulf Coast restoration was not a history of pleasant surprises. It was a history of optimistic projections, delayed timelines, qualified outcomes, and ecosystems that stabilized at a level well below what they had been before the damage. Skepticism was the only rational posture available, given the evidence on record. What broke the skepticism was not a press release. It was not a monitoring report circulated among fisheries managers. It was not a peer-reviewed paper. It was a school of redfish holding in the current around a pile of discarded shells, behaving in a way that 25 years of professional experience said should not be possible in those waters. The lived evidence arrived before the scientific documentation caught up to it. Lenz changed his position not because someone persuaded him, but because he saw something that his existing framework could not accommodate. Within 18 months of the first shell deposits hitting the seafloor, monitoring teams had found bacterial biofilms colonizing the calcium surfaces faster than any artificial reef substrate had previously recorded. The shells were not acting as passive debris. They are composed primarily of aragonite, a form of calcium carbonate that dissolves slowly in seawater, releasing calcium ions that create localized alkaline pockets in the immediately surrounding water. Those pockets were precisely the chemical conditions that calcifying organisms, barnacles, tube worms, juvenile oysters require before they can initiate the attachment process. The shells were not just providing surface area. They were manufacturing the invitation. Concrete reefs cannot do this. Steel cannot do this. The chemistry is specific to the material, and the material had been going to landfill. By year 3, monitoring surveys were recording an average of 847 oysters per cubic meter of deposited shells. Nearby soft bottom areas with no substrate supported virtually none. The reef was no longer confined to the original deposition footprint. Oysters were dying. contributing their own shells, and providing substrate for the next wave of larvae. The structure was building itself. Vertical accumulation, horizontal, expansion, no additional human input required after the initial dump. The fish followed the structure. They always do. The moment three-dimensional complexity appears on a featureless seafloor, species that require it show up. Redfish first, using the complex shell matrix for cover and feeding. Sheepshead, exploiting the invertebrate communities that had colonized the hard surfaces. Flounder working the edges. Snook, appearing in numbers not recorded in those waters for years. Biomass around the reef sites increased by more than 340% compared to control areas. Species diversity increased by 280%. These were not fish relocating from somewhere nearby. Juvenile counts confirmed they were animals born in those waters, surviving to maturity in habitat that had not previously been capable of supporting them. The reef was producing fish, not concentrating them. That distinction is the entire argument. When Lenz made his statement from the rail of his boat, he was not the only one changing position. Charter operators across Cedar Key, who had formally opposed the program, began requesting new reef sites near popular fishing grounds, approaching the same commission they had fought 6 years earlier. Hotels, bait shops, and waterfront restaurants reported measurable revenue increases directly attributable to the marine activity around the reef sites. The economic reversal followed the ecological one, and both followed the moment when the evidence became impossible to argue with from a boat. What makes the Lenz reversal worth examining is not the personal drama of a man admitting he was wrong. It is the specific conditions that made the reversal possible. He was wrong in a direction that cost him something. His opposition had been public, formal, and professionally invested. Reversing it required absorbing that cost in public, in front of the same community where he had staked his credibility on the opposite position. The fact that he did it anyway, and did it immediately on the water rather than quietly months later in private, says something about the quality of evidence required to move a well-grounded skeptic. It was not marginal. It was not statistically significant at the 95% confidence level. It was a school of redfish, behaving in a way that 25 years of experience said was impossible, and it was sitting right there in front of him. The program survived Hurricane Irma in 2017 with data that extended the reversal from the fishing community into coastal engineering circles. Shorelines backed by the restored reefs experienced 30 to 40% less erosion than unprotected stretches nearby. Engineers estimated the reefs had prevented approximately $3 million in coastal property damage during a single storm. The total cost of the 15-year restoration program was approximately $5 million. The reefs had nearly paid for themselves in one night. Seawalls crack and corrode. The oyster reefs repaired themselves after storm damage through new larval settlement, growing structurally stronger with each subsequent generation. Coastal engineers who had dismissed oyster restoration as a conservation project, peripheral to their actual work of protecting shorelines with concrete and steel, found themselves without a convincing counter-argument. By the early 2000s and 20s, the oldest reef sites had roughly doubled in total area from their original deposition footprint. The intervention had ended. The ecosystem had not. It was running on its own biological momentum, each generation of oysters adding shell for the next, each expansion creating more habitat, filtering more water, protecting more shoreline. The cycle that had been broken by overharvesting and pollution had been restarted by discarded restaurant waste, and it was now perpetuating itself without any further assistance. The scientific documentation followed the lived experience at every stage. The monitoring reports confirmed what the fishermen had already seen from their boats. The engineering assessments confirmed what the storms had already tested. The peer-reviewed papers confirmed what the ecosystem had already built. The evidence moved from the water to the instruments, not the other way around. Mike Lenz was wrong about the shells. He was also the person most qualified to say so, and the most credible witness to what had replaced his original position. The program produced a reef. It also produced something rarer, a man with 25 years of professional investment in a wrong answer, who looked at the evidence and said plainly that it had been wrong all along. That combination, the ecosystem recovery and the human reckoning it forced, is the story the data alone cannot tell.